Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. US President-elect Joe Biden's team have announced he and his deputy Kamala Harris are to make tackling the coronavirus pandemic their top priority following his win over Donald Trump in the US election. Announcing the first steps in his transition plan, his team said there would be more testing and Americans would be asked to wear masks. However, his win remains a projection as key states are still counting votes, while Mr. Trump's campaign announced he does not plan to concede.
If you count the legal votes, I easily
Mr. Trump is launching legal challenges to the results in several key states. He has made unsubstantiated claims of electoral fraud, but election officials say there is no evidence that the vote was rigged against him. The first coronavirus vaccine can prevent more than 90% of people from getting COVID-19. That's according to analysts by two leading companies. Pfizer and BioNTech described it as a great day for science and humanity. Their vaccine has been tested on 43,500 people in 6 countries, and no safety concerns have yet been raised. The companies plan to apply for emergency approval to use the vaccine by the end of the month. There are around a dozen vaccines in the final stages of testing around the world, but this is the first to show any results. The UK has said there is goodwill on both sides to progress towards a Brexit trade deal as a new round of talks with the European Union begin in London. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has met with British representatives in London. The UK left the European Union in January, but the sides are trying to clinch a deal that would govern nearly $1 trillion in annual trade. Mr. Barnier said he was very happy to be back in London for talks and work continues. The talks have snagged over state aid rules and fisheries, a sector laden with symbolism for Brexit supporters in Britain. Police in the Georgian capital Tbilisi have fired water cannon at crowds protesting against the results of last week's parliamentary election. Thousands of people gathered outside the Central Election Commission to demand a new vote after accusing the governing party of rigging the poll. The Georgian Dream Party has denied the accusations of fraud, while international election observers said fundamental freedoms were respected, but criticised aspects of the process. Georgian Dream, which was founded by billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili and has been in power since 2012, secured over 48% of votes in the election held on October the 31st. The victory gives the party the right to form the country's next government. Azeris have celebrated on the streets of Baku after President Ilham Aliyev said his country's forces had taken Shusha, the second largest city in the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. Shusha is of cultural and strategic importance to both sides. At least 1,000 people have died in nearly 6 weeks of fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh, a mountainous enclave internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but populated and controlled by ethnic Armenians. Armenia's defense ministry denied Mr. Aliyev's statement. Thousands of Thai protesters have gathered to the Grand Palace in Bangkok to demand curbs to the king's powers and the removal of the government. Chanting "Slave to Dictatorship," more than 10,000 protesters spilled onto the streets of the capital and were met by water cannon of the police. It's the latest in months of protests demanding curbs to the powers of the king, as well as the resignation of Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha, a former general who seized power in a 2014 coup. Bolivia's former president Evo Morales has arrived near the border from where he plans to cross into the country from exile in Argentina. Mr. Morales said on Saturday that he would return after the inauguration of Luis Arce, who was sworn in on Sunday. The former president will be coming back to Bolivia nearly 1 year after resigning under pressure following allegations of fraud during the presidential election and escaping to exile in Argentina. And finally, Virgin Hyperloop, a futuristic transport concept involving pods inside vacuum tubes carrying passengers at high speeds, has trialled its first ever journey. In the trial in a desert in Nevada, 2 passengers, both company staff, travelled the length of a 500-metre test track in 15 seconds, reaching 174 kilometres an hour. However, this is a fraction of Virgin's ambitions for travel speeds of more than 1,000 kilometres an hour. Virgin Hyperloop is not the only firm developing the concept, but nobody has carried passengers before. The concept is based on the world's fastest magnetic levitation trains, then made faster by speeding along inside vacuum tubes. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.